It's being called one of the most dramatic Kentucky Derbies in years. A 23-1 long shot named Golden Tempo storms down the stretch at Churchill Downs. A horse named Great White throws its jockey at the starting gate in a terrifying scene before the race even begins. And a woman named Cherie DeVos becomes the first female trainer to win the most storied race in American horse racing. And somehow, the New York Times leads with the hats. Joining me now are Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor, and James Chen, our geopolitical analyst. Sophia, let me start with you. Is the media coverage of this derby actually doing justice to what happened, or are we watching a great American story get slowly strangled by the wrong narrative?
Thanks, Emma. Look, what happened at Churchill Downs on Saturday was genuinely extraordinary, and I mean that without any qualification. A 23-1 shot wins the Kentucky Derby. A woman trains the winner, the first woman to ever do it in 152 years of this race. And a man in the crowd has a seizure that leads to a diagnosis that might have saved his life. These are remarkable stories. But watch how the media handles them, Emma, because it tells you everything. The New York Times runs a fashion piece on the hats. The networks immediately reach for the DEI framing on DeVos, treating her achievement not as the product of a lifetime of expertise and competitive excellence, but as some kind of institutional progress report. It's insulting. It's reductive. Ben Shapiro has said it better than I can. Genuine competitive meritocracy produces the outcomes that identity politics claims to want, and then the left swoops in and colonizes the achievement. DeVos didn't win because of a quota or a diversity initiative. She won because she's brilliant at her job. And the second the media makes it about anything else, they actually diminish what she did.
But Sophia, isn't there an argument that simply acknowledging the first woman to do something in 152 years, is just recording history accurately? Is it really DEI framing to note that this is a barrier broken? And James, what's your take on this? Where does legitimate historical recognition end and political co-option begin?
Well, look, I think Sophia's raising a real tension, but I'd push back slightly on the framing. Here's the thing. The Kentucky Derby is fundamentally a free market story. And I think that's actually the more powerful lens here. Churchill Downs Incorporated generated over $1.9 billion in revenue in 2024. The Derby generates roughly $225 million in economic activity for Louisville every single year. This is a private sporting institution that has maintained its identity, its tradition, its genuine competitive integrity across 152 years. And it has done so precisely because it hasn't allowed institutional interference to dilute the product. Cherie DeVos winning is a free market outcome. The best trainer with the best horse on the day won the race. That's the story. And yes, recording that she's the first woman is historically accurate. But the moment institutions start trying to manufacture those outcomes rather than allowing the market to produce them, you corrupt everything. The Kentucky Derby's power comes from the fact that it is ruthlessly real.
I hear what James is saying, but and I mean this with respect. I think he's actually underselling the cultural dimension here. This isn't just an economic story. The Kentucky Derby is one of the last great American traditions that has not been hollowed out. It hasn't been kneecapped by the politics that have destroyed the NFL's reputation, or infected the Oscars, or turned the Super Bowl halftime show into a political lecture. And that's precisely why we should be vigilant about it. The moment the DEI machinery gets its bureaucratic hands on horse racing, you'll see the same thing that happened to every other American institution that let it in. You'll see racing directors appointed for reasons other than expertise. You'll see the word inclusion in every press release. And 10 years from now, people will wonder why the product feels hollow. Tradition isn't a dirty word. It's the infrastructure of excellence.
Here's what I want to know, and I'm going to push both of you on this. Given everything we saw at this Derby, from the dramatic scratch of Great White, to the 23-1 upset, to DeVos' historic win, where does the Kentucky Derby itself go from here? Is this a moment that strengthens the institution, or does the narrative around it actually create the very pressures that could change it? James, where do you see this playing out?
The way I see this playing out is actually quite optimistic in the near term, but with a real medium-term risk. In the next 6 months, DeVos' win generates enormous commercial interest, sponsorships, television deals, human interest coverage that actually grows the sport's audience. That's genuinely good. The risk, though, is that success attracts exactly the kind of corporate and activist attention that changes the incentive structure. If current trends in American institutional life continue, and I think they will, there will be pressure on Churchill Downs to formalize what happened organically. To create DEI structures, diversity hiring mandates, representation targets in training programs, and the moment you do that, you've replaced a free market of talent with a managed outcome. History tells us that never ends well for the sport.
Here's what concerns me most, and this is actually about the broader American cultural moment, not just horse racing. Mark Toothaker's story. A man goes to the Kentucky Derby in person, has a medical episode, gets a diagnosis that saves his life. That doesn't happen if he's watching on a screen. The real risk here is that America is losing its appetite for shared physical experience, for being actually present at great events, in a crowd, in a specific place, with all the unpredictability that entails. The trajectory suggests that the Kentucky Derby's greatest cultural contribution in 2026 might not even be the race itself. It might be the reminder that showing up in the real world still matters. And if we lose that instinct as a culture, we lose something that no algorithm can replace.
Sophia Reeves, James Chen, what a conversation. One thing's for certain, somewhere in a box stall in Louisville tonight, a 23-1 long shot named Golden Tempo is eating better than most of the journalists who failed to pick him.